it's Jennifer from Flux. In this video, I'm going to show you how to crochet this beautiful star stitch. This is a lovely texture that you can create pretty easily once you get the hang of it. We're going to go through it every step of the way together. Now, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see. I grabbed my Sweet Shop scarf. I'll put the link down below if you'd like to jump into this project after you learn the stitch. But I chose this because I did star stitch in lots of different colors. You can see all the colors represented. Now the back of it looks pretty too. It makes an interesting texture as well. And we're going to go through the pattern repeat and learn how to do this. Now I'm going to be using some bulky yarn so you can see what I'm doing here. And when I do star stitch, I like to go up a hook size because it is a dense fabric. As you can see, my hand is not visible through there. It's not lacy or holey. So I like to go up a hook size for star stitch just to kind of loosen things up a little bit as I work. So let's get started. To begin, we're going to put a slip knot on our hook. Wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop, bring the yarn behind the loop, reach in with your hook, bring up a loop, and tighten. Now when you do star stitch, you can do any odd number for your starting chain. So any odd number will work, and that will help you change the width of your swatch that you'll be making, okay? So we're going to do a starting chain of 15. Again, any odd number will work. So to make a chain, wrap the yarn around the hook and just bring it through the loop. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so again, any odd number. Okay, so for row 1, what we're going to do is something called a single crochet 5 together. And that sounds kind of complex, but all it is we're going to just be bringing up a series of loops, okay? So in the second chain from the hook, this loop here does not count. We're going to go 1 and 2. So that second chain from the hook, we're going to work a single crochet 5 together, okay? So what you want to do is insert your hook into that chain, that second chain from the hook, go right into that chain, bring up a loop. You'll have 2 loops on your hook. Go into the next chain and do the same thing. Bring up a loop. You'll have 5 loops on your hook. Go in the next chain and bring up a loop. You'll have 4 loops on the hook. Go into the next chain, bring up a loop. You'll have 5 loops on the hook. Go into the next chain and bring up a loop. And you now have 6 loops on the hook. So then what we want to do, I like to sort of straighten things out a little bit, loosen things up a bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to wrap the yarn around our hook and we're going to bring it through all 6 of those loops. So bring it through all 6 loops, nice and slow, especially when you're learning. You can also already see sort of that star forming. And then we're going to chain 1 to close the top of it. So let me just come in a little bit closer for you. Okay, so chain 1 just to close up the top, just like that, okay? So this is officially our first little star. Okay, so then what we're going to do is we're going to build the next star onto this one. So at the top where we just made that chain, that's called the eye of the star, that little loop there. So I'm going to be referring to that as the eye. So you can just kind of see it at the top there. So what we want to do is we're going to do the same thing that we just did into the chains, but we're going to work it into the star as well, okay? So go into the eye with your hook and bring up a loop. You'll have 2 loops on your hook. Then what you want to do is those last 2 loops that you worked, see them there on the side? You want to go in between them and bring up a loop. It's a little tricky when you're learning, but it'll be a little more fluid as you make a few. Then what you're going to do is go into that last chain that you worked. You can see it's really big. It's much bigger than some of these other ones that follow. See that big loop there? You want to go into that last chain worked and bring up a loop. You'll have 4 loops on the hook. Then go into the next chain that you see, bring up a loop. We now have 5 loops on the hook. Go into the next chain, bring up a loop. You'll have 6 loops once again on your hook. That's our goal. So I like to this is just a personal preference, I like to just kind of loosen it up a little bit. It's much easier to pull that hook back through. Wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through all 6 loops. And then we're going to chain 1 to close the top once again. Okay? So now for the rest of your row, however many chains you did, we're going to do the same thing. So let me grab a little bit more yarn. And we're going to do the same thing we just did. We're going to keep building those stars off of the other stars, okay? So go back into that eye, bring up a loop. Go in between those last two loops worked. You can kind of pull them apart if that helps. Go in between those last two loops worked and bring up a loop. 3 loops are on our hook again. Go into that last chain worked, and I like to kind of pull it open because you can really see it really well that way. Go in there and bring up a loop. Go into the next chain and bring up a loop. And go into the next chain and bring up a loop. So now we have 6 loops on our hook once again. So we're going to loosen it up a little bit, wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through all 6 of those loops, and then close the top by chaining 1. Okay? So we now have 3 stars. It's looking really cute. Okay, so we're going to go make another one. Go into the eye of the last star you worked and bring up a loop. 2 loops on the hook. Go in between those last 2 loops worked. Pull them apart if you need to. Bring up a loop. 3 loops are on our hook. Pull your chain back a little and you can see that big chain right there. Go in that chain, that last chain worked, and bring up a loop. 4 loops are on our hook. Go into the next chain, bring up a loop. 5 loops are on the hook. Go into the next chain and bring up a loop. 6 loops are on our hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 6 loops. Just like that. All right, we have just a few chains left on our row here, so let's work into those as well. All right, once again, we're going to go into that eye of our star. The last star you worked, go into the eye of it, bring up a loop. 2 loops are on the hook. Go into those last 2 loops worked, pulling apart if needed, bring up a loop. 3 loops are on the hook. Go into that last chain work, that big open chain there that you see, bring up a loop. 4 loops are on our hook. Go into the next chain, bring up a loop. 5 loops are on the hook. Go into the next chain, bring up a loop. 6 loops are on our hook now. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 6 loops, and chain 1 to close that star up. All right, so we made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars. Now, you should have one more chain left at the end of the row. You can see it right there at the end where we began when we first started our chain. And what we're going to do in that last chain is work a half double crochet to finish the row, okay? So what we want to do to work that stitch is wrap yarn around hook, insert it into that last chain, bring up a loop, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 3 loops to finish. So here is our row 1, okay? Okay, row 2 is super easy. What we're going to do is chain 2, 1, 2, and turn our work. Now for this row, all we have to do is work 2 half double crochets in each of the eyes. Remember the eye of our star? We're just going to work 2 half double crochets in each eye all the way across, okay? So here's our first eye right here, and if you're not sure, if this is new to you, you can kind of turn this over, and make sure you're in the right spot. Sometimes it's easier to see it on the back where the eye is across. So if you need to flip it over and peek every so often, that's okay. Okay, so this first eye, work 2 half double crochets in that first eye. 1 and 2. Hop over to the next star, and you can peek if you need to. There's our next eye. Work 2 half double crochets into that next eye. 1 and 2. Go to the next eye and work 2 half double crochets. 1 and 2. And then go to the next eye and work 2 half double crochets into that eye as well. And the next eye, which is also the last one of the row. 1 and 2. Super easy. Okay, so now at the end of the row, we're just going to work a half double crochet into that last stitch. So you'll kind of see it off to the side here. You can kind of turn it if you need to, but just work a half double crochet into that last stitch. You might need to sort of pick it up a little bit and kind of lift it a little, but just go right into that last stitch, and just one this time, okay? So row 2 is complete. Now the fun part is when we flip it over, we're just going to peek for a minute. Those stars have been completed. So now they make a full radius and it looks pretty. Okay, so let's flip it back over, because what we need to do now is begin row 3. For row 3, what we're going to do is turn our work first this time and then chain 3. So 1, 2, 3, and that way you'll be able to see your chain very clearly. Okay, so then what we're going to do is that same single crochet 5 together that makes that beautiful star, we're going to work it into this chain that we just did for this row. This is a little bit different. So in the second chain from the hook, this loop here again does not count. We're going to go 1, 2. In that second chain from the hook, we're going to insert our hook into that second chain from the hook, bring up a loop. You'll have 2 loops on the hook. Insert it into that next chain and bring up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on the hook. Then what we're going to do is insert the hook into the first stitch that you see. It's right there on the end. It just looks like a sideways V. Insert it into that first stitch and bring up a loop. You'll have 4 loops on the hook. Insert it into the next stitch and bring up a loop. You'll have 5 loops on the hook. Insert it into the next stitch and bring up a loop. You'll now have 6 loops on your hook. Wrap the yarn around your hook, bring it through. Now you can kind of loosen it up again if you need to. Bring it through all 6 of those loops and chain 1, just like that. So now we have a star, and if you notice, the eye of the star down here lines up with this new eye that we just created. It'll look like a, actually let me grab the scarf so you can see. They sort of all line up nice and neat, as you can see, okay? All right, let's come back to this. Now what we're going to do, now that we have that first star established, we're going to kind of just do what we did before. It'll seem more familiar. So go into the eye that you just made, just like that, and bring up a loop. Now go in between those last 2 loops worked. See, this is kind of familiar now. Go in between those last 2 loops worked and bring up a loop. Now go into that last stitch worked. It's a stitch this time, not a chain. And it's, again, it still looks pretty open, right? So go into that last stitch worked and bring up a loop. You'll have 4 loops on the hook now. Go into the next stitch, bring up a loop. 5 loops are on the hook. Go into the next stitch and bring up a loop. 6 loops are on our hook this time. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 6 loops, and then chain 1 to close the top of that star up. Okay, and you can see this star now lines up with that star as well. So we're just going to repeat this all the way across till we get to the end. We have 3 more stars to work, so let's work those together. So go into that eye of the star that you just made, bring up a loop. Go in between those last 2 loops worked like we did before, bring up a loop, 3 loops on the hook. Go in that last stitch work, see it'll be a little more open than the other ones are, bring up a loop. Go into the next stitch, bring up a loop. We now have 5 loops on the hook. Go into the next stitch and bring up a loop. We now have 6 loops on the hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 6 loops and chain 1. Next star. Go into the eye of the star that we just made and bring up a loop. 2 loops on the hook. Go in between those last 2 loops worked and bring up a loop. 3 loops are on the hook. Go into that last stitch worked. It'll be a little bit more open. It's easy to see. Bring up a loop. 4 loops are on our hook. Go into the next stitch. Bring up a loop. 5 loops are on the hook. Go into the next stitch and bring up a loop. 6 loops are on the hook. Wrap yarn around the hook. Kind of loosen it up if you need to. Bring it through all 6 loops and chain 1. All right, 1 more star to do. Right there, see how it's going to line up with that next one? Okay, last star. Go into the eye of the star that you just made and bring up a loop. Go in between the 2 loops, the last 2 loops of the star that you worked, and bring up a loop. 3 loops are on the hook. Go in that last stitch worked and bring up a loop. 4 loops are on the hook. Go into the next stitch, bring up a loop. 5 loops are on the hook. Go into that last, or the next stitch rather, bring up a loop. 6 loops on our hook again. Loosen it up, straighten it up. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 6 loops, and close with a chain. So now we've done our stars, and to finish row 3, what we're going to do is just work a half double crochet in the topmost chain from the previous row. So when we did our turning chain, there was a chain right up top there, and we're just going to work a half double crochet right into that topmost chain that we worked. And make sure you pick up 2 loops on that. If it's a little snug, it's okay. But just work a half double crochet in that topmost chain, and the row is complete. So now we have a beautiful little swatch, okay? Now, to continue with star stitch, you just want to keep repeating rows 2 and 3, 2 and 3, over and over and over again until you have the swatch size that you need, or if you're making a scarf, let me just zoom out so you can see it. If you're making a scarf like we did, you'll just keep going and going and going until, you know, however long you want it to be. 2 things I wanted to mention is when you're doing star stitch, you'll want to end on row 2 because that completes, remember the half double crochet row that we did? That completes the star. Remember when we finished row 2 and did all of our half double crochets, it sort of completed that circular shape that we're after, that star shape. You'll want to end on row 2 when you're working this. Also, if you're changing colors, you'll want to change colors after you complete row 2, and that gives you, see how you have a completely finished row of stars, and then I started another one. You want to switch colors after row 2 if you're doing some striping as well, okay? So just repeat rows 2 and 3, 2 and 3 over and over and over again until you have the amount of star stitch that you like. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I will put the link down below for this project if you love this stitch as much as I do and you want to jump right into a project. There's also a matching hat called the Sweet Shop hat, so check that out too. I can put both links down below for that. If you click on the blog, there's also a full photo tutorial of this as well, so you can refer back to it if you just need to like peek at it for a minute. Sometimes if I've done this stitch and I'm feeling a little rusty, I'll go back and just peek at a photo tutorial and look at that. So check all those links out. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest Fiber Flux video updates. Thanks again!